G'day guys, how you going? What I want to do today is I want to show you guys how I work a creek and exactly what I'm looking for. It's a fairly deep valley and we've got a lot of workings up in the pine plantations there. I sort of took notice of it yesterday, and right in the centre of the screen there you'll see a prominent rock bar. Okay, now that rock bar is actually right at the end of a bend. So this is where the water's going to start slowing down. I love prospecting. Prospecting for me is all about getting out in these creeks and doing samples here and there until you find a good spot. So when I saw this rock bar, I went and investigated. One small little crevice which I got 5 shades of colour, and I thought, okay, well there's a bit of colour on that, being on the end of an inside bend, so there must be colour elsewhere. So then I saw this big rock sitting in this crevice here, pulled it out, and I want to show you guys what I've got. There are some really nice pickers. There's even a little nugget there. Now all of that was out of that one hole. Now being a prospector, that gets me excited, because if that's coming from one hole, so that's the sort of stuff I'm looking for in a creek like this. And it all starts with a few test pans. My first test pan there showed 5 shades of colour. Only 5 little specks. My first pan with the top stuff showed around about 10 shades of really small gold. But then I realised what I thought was bedrock wasn't bedrock. It was floaters jammed right in. Now if you have a look right down here, you can see this grey clay. And this grey clay is still full of gravel. And I'm not joking, when I was pulling the dirt out in the last pan, I actually saw the pickers sitting on the clay. And I picked that bigger piece up with my fingers and just put it in the pan. I didn't even have to pan it off. So what gets me excited is, I haven't even cleaned this hole out properly yet. There's probably more gold in it. In fact, I guarantee there's more gold in it. So my intention is I'm going to fill this up with water. Use a bucket and a Yabby Pump, and I'm going to suck it out. You might get your hands in there to try and pick it up. But the gold, if it's wet, is always going to fall off your fingers. It doesn't matter how good you are with your tools and your trowels and your little shovels and spades. The only way to get it is to pick it up using a Yabby Pump. The Yabby Pump is hand operated, and so basically it's just a sucker. And it'll pick up, it'll literally, what I'll do is I'll sweep all this, I'll wash it all down, and it will literally pick up every bit of gold. And I'll show you how I do that later on. I just want to show you some tools of the trade. This is a crevicing tool which I've made. It's my own design, and I used to use fencing wire, and I got some gal rod and I made these ones here. Different heads on them like that. So what I do is I put a bit of water in the hole, and then I'll get my crevicing tool, and then I'll just get into all the little nooks and crannies. Now, when you empty the hole out, you flush a bit of water down the sides and it cleans the sides out. You can see little pockets that you've missed. So very much like dry crevicing, when you use a paintbrush to sweep it clean, okay, in this case you're using water. And there's a little pocket there I've missed, and you can tell that it's been missed simply because the face of the bedrock's now nice and clean. So I got my crevicing tool in there. Have a look at this one here. Looks like there could be still a little bit of dirt just in there. So I get my crevicing tool and I get right into it. Scrape it. Really scrape it hard. Just over here in this corner. Down there. All these little tiny... Anything that's soft like that. See how it's soft and it's coming away? That could be holding gold. Okay, so if it ain't bedrock, and it's false bedrock, which means the gold is still probably going to be there. Okay, so then what I do is I grab another tool that I love to use, and that's a paintbrush. Okay, so just like you saw me use a paintbrush in how to get the most gold out of a dry creek bed, I use a paintbrush in a wet creek. And a really good thing about paintbrush is you just splash a bit of water up like this, and you just brush it all down the side of the rock. The paintbrush is fantastic but just cleaning out those bits that you've just scraped. Up here. Down there. Okay, so that's a little bit of extra dirt that I've loosened. Now what I want to do is I want to flush it out, so just grab a little jar of water or an ice cream container, and then I just pour it down onto the areas that I've just worked on, and that's now pushing all that dirt down into one central location. Using my paintbrush, I'm going to push everything into that lower section. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill up this hole with enough water to use the Yabby Pump, and I'm going to pick up all the dirt that I haven't yet picked up. And I'll show you exactly how I do that. Okay, so I'll show you guys how I use my Yabby Pump. It's a bit of an art form. You got to be really careful when you use it, because yeah, you'll pick up the gold, but potentially you'll spit it out, you'll throw it out. So I'm going to fill this hole up with water. You've got to have a fair bit of water for your Yabby Pump to work. So I'll just bucket some water in. Okay, and you need to place the bucket right next to where you're Yabby pumping. Either use a deep bucket or use a pan or a tub with a sieve, a 1/4 inch sieve over the top. Now you've got to use a sieve. If you're not using a bucket's not so bad because it's deep, but if you're using a pan or a tub, you've got to use a sieve, because if you don't, when you drop the water from the pump into your pan or your tub, it'll just splash straight back out. And what the sieve does is it retards that splashback. What I do is I've now swept everything down into that one little section, and I'll long draw. I just let the materials drop into the bucket, because if I push them in, it'll hit the bottom of the bucket and splash straight back out. So again, and you can hear the materials just going straight into the bucket. The other reason why you want to have your bucket right next to where you're Yabby pumping, if you do spill some, it'll all go back into the same hole that you're pumping out. And that's it. Now I'm going to pan it off. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you guys what I got out of that hole using the Yabby pump. And like I said before, you'd be amazed at how much gold you can't pick up with just your hands and your little implements, your little tools, hand trowels, etc, etc. And look at that. If you have a look in the corner, right there, you can see the gold coming up. You'll probably get the majority of the gold out of a hole with your Yabby pump. Now already we've seen probably close to maybe a gram, maybe even more. Let's see what we got in this one. Look at that colour. A lot of colour. So I'll try and isolate it a bit, get it up on top of the pan. Look at that. Now that's how much stuff, all that gold, all those little chunky pieces all through here, that's how much stuff I wasn't able to pick up with my hands and my trowel. And that's almost half a gram, I reckon. Be getting pretty close. So there you go. All that gold I just picked up with my Yabby pump. I reckon I've just got around about 1.5 grams, possibly 2 grams, out of one crevice. Just a quick update. So there's my original hole there. Now I took some samples there over near the bank. I got 4 to 5 shows of colour. I dug down further into the really puggy clay, and I got another few specks. So it's really not worth working that clay. So then what I did is I picked this small crevice right in the centre of both the original hole and the bank. And this little crevice is running back towards the centre of the creek. You might originally have a plan when you start, but what you've got to do is you've got to follow the gold. Now what I've done is I've done a couple of spec pans. I've got some good colour, some nice pieces. So it's definitely more towards the centre of the creek. And I want to show you something here. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it, but right there is a piece of gold. So that says to me the gold is definitely more concentrated towards the centre of the creek. So I'm now going to follow this crevice down towards the centre of the creek. Now if that hole there is any indication, this one should be pretty good. This was the original hole. I went over to the bank there, got some sporadic colour. So then I decided to come back to this crevice in the centre, and I followed it down into this hole here. And there's a massive floater in the way, and it's just still diving underneath that floater. But I want to show you guys what I got out of this very small area. So that hole there, and that crevice down into that hole there, and this was the result today. Now there's some really nice pickers there. There's some little chunks. That bloke there, he's probably around about 0.2. So at least 2 or 3 grams there out of such a small area. And I haven't even cleaned the bedrock there yet. Still a little bit to do up there. And of course, I've got to move this floater. So I've got a lot of work to do, but that just goes to show you, if you put in the hard work, that you can get some really good gold from one slab of bedrock. And this is just one slab of bedrock, and in this creek, there are literally thousands of them. Thanks for watching.